What does Jim Pfaff think? Jim is the president of the Conservative Caucus, theconservativecaucus.org, and we bring him in this morning. Jim, I'm glad you made time for us today. Hello.
Hey, thanks for having me, Chris. Great to be with you.
Thanks a lot. I have to know if you, right now, at this hour, and again, I say at this hour, not looking back, not even projecting forward, but at this hour, how do you feel about Mike Johnson? How do you feel about Trump, this retreat, the things they're talking about? I feel good, the vibes are good, but I know you look with eagle eyes if it's actually going to happen.
Well, before he became speaker, I really did like Mike Johnson. Afterwards,
I'm sorry, you say you did or didn't?
I did. That changed very quickly after he first became speaker. And, but the positive that is taking place right now is Mike Johnson owes his position to Donald Trump right now. Donald Trump pitched the House Freedom Caucus guys to vote for him on Organization Day on January 3rd. And then he talked Keith Self and Ralph Norman, whose 2 votes kept him out of the seat initially. They left the vote open on the floor. Trump talked to them, and he came around. That makes the dynamic much different for Mike Johnson than it was beforehand because he was beholden to Hakeem Jeffries. He kept his seat after the Matt Gaetz motion to vacate almost caused him to lose his seat, just like Kevin McCarthy had. Hakeem Jeffries put the votes together for him. This time it was Donald Trump. So the dynamic looks more positive than it has for a long time. And Donald Trump's really the leader of the Republican Party right now. Mike Johnson's not that yet. He could become a great leader of it if he really does follow through. But right now I have a jaundiced and cautious eye.
So when you hear, and I think you probably heard what I heard, that these subcommittees were basically tasked day one when they had these little breakout sessions, find cuts. We want to talk about meaningful spending cuts. They're saying, at least saying, $2.5 to $3 trillion they've already identified amongst their committees in potential cuts. How optimistic are you on that?
Well, what's interesting about that is they know these numbers and have for years and years and years. They just haven't done anything about it. It's Trump leadership. The cuts are happening right now over in the White House where the executive branch can do what it wants with the money it's already been given. I'll be very surprised if we get the same kind of cutting mentality in the House. I'll be pleasantly surprised. I see Mario Diaz-Balart behind Mike Johnson there. Mario Diaz-Balart was the guy pushing so much against Jim Jordan being speaker. He and the appropriators were determined not to allow Jim Jordan to become speaker, and that's what brought us to the Mike Johnson situation, which ended up being so much of a disaster until right now. So I don't need to speak constant ill on these guys. Donald Trump's got the leadership. He's providing the momentum because all the actions happening over at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue right now. If the House can be inspired by that, which it sounds like they're trying to be, then that's great. The Congressional Institute, which helps the Republican Conference every year run these conferences. I worked on Capitol Hill for 9 years. I know how this works. And listen, it's always a time of discussion. It's usually only at a time of how can we keep doing what we've been doing. That dynamic was a little bit different with Trump speaking at it yesterday. So we'll see. Again, cautiously optimistic. I know there's that much spending cuts out there if they're only willing to do it.
Jim Pfaff is the president of the Conservative Caucus, theconservativecaucus.org. If they're willing to do it, that's what it comes down to. You have been a group trying to hold Republicans, congressional Republicans' feet to the fire on these issues for a long time now. One of the things that we just know, and I think everybody should understand, is the old adage, everybody hates Congress but loves their congressman, right? And so the deal is we all grumble and shake our fists and say those SOBs on Capitol Hill spend too darn much. But if my congressman comes home and can build me a new bridge and do the ribbon cutting and everybody applaud because there's a new wing of a whatever and they brought home the pork to get it done, that's always the way it works. The individual member really likes to be able to come home to their respective district and say, look what I secured. So they can show up in the local papers and look like the hero or heroine, right? That's the game. And so it's very addictive individually for these people to not go back to their districts and celebrate the wins they brought home. They have to collectively as a group say, we're going to forego celebrating ourselves back in our districts to get a bigger cause achieved, right?
Well, surely. And that's been the case because of a lack of leadership out of either party for decades and decades now. So let me take you back to a Wall Street Journal article that came out in it's right in the beginning of the Obama administration. And they went back and looked at two reports out of the Office of Management and Budget in the White House in 2000 and 2011. We had a $4 trillion debt at the time. They were wringing their hands because they were saying this debt's going to be paid off by 2012 or 13. And what do we do with these 30-year bonds? And they were starting to think through the process of this, okay? This was right in the beginning of the Obama administration, where the national debt was about $9 to $10 trillion. $30 trillion later, the American people have had enough of it. And Joe Biden was so bad as president. He did so much to take so much away from the American people, to overtax, to go into inflation, that argument's not going to take as well anymore. Now, politicians on Capitol Hill still want to use that for their political benefit, and that's always the tension. That dynamic isn't playing so well, evidenced by the election in November. And now we've got a leader in the White House, in Donald Trump, who's really setting that agenda. I think we're going to see a reprieve from it for at least 2 years. Hopefully it settles in as the normal course of politics so we can turn this country around. But that's the challenge for the next 4 years.
Jim Pfaff is, again, he's the president of the Conservative Caucus, theconservativecaucus.org. Where are you most optimistic? I mean, you just said it, the first 2 years, that's what we've got. We're looking at 2 years. Clock is ticking. A lot of debate and discussion about can they get something big achieved quickly. The levers of Congress don't move quickly, ever. We know that. But can this be done? Big, boldly, quick? What do you know?
Honestly, practically as well, too. The only way to move anything quickly is this reconciliation bill that they're working. Reconciliation is a process that just essentially does what it says. It reconciles the spending that each the House and the Senate have approved. You could put changes into that to get things done. And that'll be the process. Then we get this big, beautiful bill that Donald Trump said that he'd like to pass, which gets all the immigration funding in, takes care of extending his tax cuts, hopefully to get, hopefully to get the no tax on tips taken care of. Some of these things. If we can get that through the House, which only requires a majority vote in each House, that'll be the biggest thing that's done this year, likely. The majorities are too small. We already see in the Senate 3 people that are willing to be cantankerous with the president, Murkowski, Collins, and McConnell, and that becomes a challenge. But that having been said, if they get done what they say they want to get done in that bill, it'll be pretty phenomenal. It'll really set the stage. And I know that from the Conservative Caucus, we're looking at where can we help Mike Johnson get to this additional majorities thing, because we did massive independent expenditure work in 2024, spending nearly $8 million for Trump. We're going to do the same kind of thing in 2026, trying to help Congress get changed, because we do need those bigger majorities. There's a chance to do even more. So that's how we would do it. If they would pick that bill, there might be a chance for what he is saying to take place. If they don't, or if they don't go far enough, it's not. The American people are going to get so fed up that they'll go back to the Democrats. They really are not partisan. They're not pro-Republican right now. Republicans have got to perform if they want to increase majorities.
So this, one of the things that they're physically doing as we speak, border security, mass deportations, that's getting all the news and taking up a lot of, oxygen, immediate movement to provide for the common defense. I think that registers with the American people. This spending stuff, it gets a little wonky. It gets a little difficult. So you've got to show something that people can understand and explain. So people need to be able to understand that Republicans have, in fact, taken action. And then these respective members of Congress have got to go back to their districts and states and tell this story. Here's how we kicked butt on spending. They have to be able to tell a story, right, in order to maintain a majority beyond the next 2 years.
Well, the story is immigration and taxing on this bill. And it is wonky. The way spending works in Washington, trust me, I spent 9 years there. It's amazing what they do in these bills. how they put this spending together. It's actually very corrupt and absurd. But all of that can be done in the background if they will just tell those two stories. And they've got a spokesman in the White House who has to pull it off them and can do it. If they will do that, and then the Democrats get all wonky on the spending, then the Republicans win that argument. And the Democrats won't. So there are ways through this that are willing to do it. There are political strategies and ways of cutting spending in Washington, D.C. that Republicans have been able to do for years. They just have to decide to do it. And when you see what Donald Trump did with Colombia the other day, just one example, and with 200 or more executive orders, man, you've got the guy in there that'll back it up if they're just willing to be strong.
Jim Pfaff is president of the Conservative Caucus, theconservativecaucus.org. Jim, it's always a pleasure to check in. I know you're going to keep holding their feet to the fire, and we will check in with you to see how they're doing. Thank you, my friend. Glad you're here.